Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested to know in which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. You're fired. The supervisor's voice, sharp with bureaucratic rage, crackled over the phone. For protocol violation and fuel waste. Frank's only crime had been to help a young panicked soldier get back to his base during a storm. But what that supervisor, watching a glowing GPS dot on a screen miles away, didn't know was that the young soldier was a critical courier for a general directing the nation's largest military exercise. And that by breaking the rules, Frank Thompson hadn't just saved a soldier's career. He had just prevented a delay that could have compromised national security. Frank Thompson was the last driver of the last route of the night, a sentinel in a rumbling metal beast against the encroaching darkness. At 67, he was a man carved from the same quiet, resilient oak as the rolling ancient hills of his home state. His hands, though gnarled with the telltale signs of arthritis, still held the massive steering wheel of his city bus with the steady, confident grip of the Army sergeant he had once been. For 20 years, he'd been a part of the Transportation Corps, moving troops and vital supplies through landscapes far more dangerous than the rain-slicked, familiar streets of Northwood. He had navigated treacherous mountain passes under the threat of ambush and driven through blinding sandstorms where the world was reduced to a swirling vortex of brown. Now his battlefield was Route 12, a winding, lonely road that snaked through forgotten farmlands and ended at the brightly lit but soulless city depot. He saw his work not as a job, but as a quiet continuation of his service. He was still moving people, getting them home safely, ensuring the mission was complete. He knew the regulars by name, the night shift nurses with tired but kind eyes, the factory workers whose faces were permanently smudged with grease, and the other lonely souls who, like him, found a strange, rhythmic comfort in the constant hum of the engine and the reassuring hiss of the hydraulic doors. He was the route's silent, steadfast guardian. That night, the sky had ripped open with a fury. Rain, driven by a savage wind, hammered against the bus's panoramic windows like angry, metallic fists. The wind howled a mournful, banshee-like song through the cracks in the window seals. It was the kind of night that made the world feel small, fragile, and vulnerable. Frank was just pulling into the depot, his long shift officially over, his mind already on a hot cup of coffee and a warm bed. That's when he saw him, a lone, desperate figure standing under the flickering, inadequate glow of a street lamp, getting absolutely soaked. It was a kid, no older than 20, wearing a crisp Army combat uniform under a thin, useless civilian jacket that was plastered to his skin. He was drenched, shivering, and his face, illuminated in the brief flashes of lightning, was a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. As Frank pulled the bus to a stop, the young soldier ran to the door, his movements frantic, his boots splashing through the deep puddles. "Sir! Sir, is this the last bus?" he pleaded as the doors hissed open, his voice cracking with a mixture of hope and desperation. Frank nodded, his heart sinking a little for the kid. "Last one of the night, son. Everything's shutting down till morning." The soldier's face fell, the last bit of hope extinguished from his eyes. "The base? I missed the last shuttle to Fort McKinley. My train was delayed. I have to be back by 0500. I'm a courier. I have to deliver this," he said, clutching a small, sealed and heavily taped briefcase to his chest as if it were his own heart. "A taxi will cost a fortune. I don't have it. I'll be AWOL." On my first real assignment, Frank looked at the young man, at his clean-shaven face, and his terrified, honest eyes. He saw not just a passenger who had missed his ride, but a reflection of himself 40 years ago, young, scared, and burdened by the immense crushing weight of duty. He saw the uniform, the desperation, and the unbreakable promise it represented. In that single fleeting moment, the company rule book, with its strict, unbending adherence to routes and schedules, evaporated into meaningless static. But you won't believe this. His old sergeant's instincts, long dormant, took over completely. "Get on," Frank said, his voice a calm, steady rumble that cut through the storm's chaos. "Dry off. We'll figure something out." As the young soldier, a private first class named Miller, collapsed into a seat, dripping water onto the floor, Frank made a decision. He looked at the empty bus, then at the storm raging outside with ever-increasing fury, then at the clock on his dashboard. It was a 20-mile detour to the base gate, a flagrant, fireable violation of every rule in the book. His supervisor, a petty, desk-bound tyrant named Dave Callahan, watched the GPS location of every bus on his fleet like a hawk, searching for any deviation, any excuse to assert his minor authority. Frank knew the consequences, but he also knew the consequences of a soldier failing his mission. He put the bus in gear and, instead of pulling into the depot's designated parking bay, he turned the massive vehicle back onto the main road, heading away from the city towards the fort, and into the heart of the storm, miles away. In a brightly lit, climate-controlled central office, Dave Callahan stared at his monitor, a vein throbbing in his temple. He saw the digital icon for Bus 7, Frank's bus, deviate from its designated green route, becoming a rogue red line bleeding into unauthorized territory. "What is that old fool doing?" he muttered, his fingers already jabbing at the buttons to call Frank's onboard comms system. Frank ignored the buzzing call. He was focused on the road, on the mission. He was focused on the young man in his rearview mirror. "What's in the briefcase, son?" he asked gently, his voice carrying easily through the empty bus. "Can't say, sir." "It's classified," Miller replied, his voice still shaking slightly. "The orders are for General Thorne, for Operation Iron Vanguard. It has to be there before dawn, no matter what." Frank's blood ran cold. Iron Vanguard wasn't just a routine exercise. It was the largest simulated national defense drill in over a decade, involving 3 active divisions. A delay in orders could have cascading, disastrous effects on the entire operation. He pushed the accelerator a little harder. He was no longer just a bus driver. He was part of a critical mission. He dropped PFC Miller at the heavily guarded main gate of Fort McKinley just after 1 a.m. The young soldier looked as if a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "I don't know how to thank you, sir," Miller said, his voice thick with a gratitude that was almost overwhelming. Frank just gave him a tired but genuine smile. "Just do your duty, soldier. That's all the thanks I need." As the bus pulled away, the young private gave it a sharp, perfect salute, holding it until the bus's taillights disappeared into the swirling snow. The next morning, Frank walked into the depot to face the music. Callahan was waiting for him, his face a mask of smug, triumphant fury. "Thompson, my office, now!" he barked, enjoying the spectacle in front of the other drivers. In his office, Callahan held up a printout of the GPS log, the red line of Frank's detour circled in angry red ink. "Explain this. A 40-mile unauthorized trip. Do you know how much fuel you wasted? Do you know what a protocol violation of this magnitude means?" Frank stood tall, his back straight as a ramrod. "I got a soldier to his base, Dave. He was stranded, and he had a mission to complete." Callahan let out a sarcastic, barking laugh. "A soldier? You jeopardized company property and our schedules for one kid's sob story?" He didn't even let Frank explain further. He made the call right then and there, his voice filled with glee. "You're fired," he snarled, "for breaking protocol and risking postal property. Your disregard for the rules is a disgrace." Frank didn't argue. He didn't try to defend himself. He simply looked at the small man behind the big desk, a man who understood rules but not duty, and felt a quiet, profound pity. He turned and walked away. He hadn't seen the biggest surprise yet. Later that day, in the Tactical Operations Center at Fort McKinley, General Marcus Thorne, a man whose presence commanded instant respect, was reviewing the initial phase of Iron Vanguard. It had been a success, but only barely. "That Courier made it with seconds to spare," the general noted to his aide. "A communications blackout in Sector Gamma could have crippled our entire flank if those orders were late." "How did PFC Miller get here?" "I thought the shuttle service was down due to the storm." The aide checked the report. "Sir, it says here he was brought to the gate by a civilian city bus. The driver went 40 miles off-road in the blizzard to get him here." The general paused, a thoughtful, impressed expression on his stern face. "A civilian bus driver did that?" He turned to his aide. Find out who that driver is. I want to talk to him." And it was at this exact moment that everything changed. The next morning, as Dave Callahan was proudly boasting about how he finally got rid of that old Army relic, 2 black sedans with government plates pulled silently into the depot. General Thorne, in his full-dress uniform, stepped out. He walked into the depot, his very presence silencing the cavernous space. Callahan, seeing the stars on his shoulders, rushed forward, his face beaming with a sycophantic smile. "General, in honor, what can we do for you?" The general's eyes were like ice. "I'm looking for one of your drivers, Frank Thompson." Callahan's smile vanished. "Mr. Thompson is no longer with the company. A serious breach of protocol, I'm afraid." The general's voice dropped to a dangerously low level. "A breach of protocol?" "Your driver, a former sergeant of the United States Army, made a command decision in the field. He prioritized the completion of a critical military mission over your fuel budget. He understood that the contents of that briefcase were more important than your schedule. He showed more leadership and understanding of duty in one night than you have probably shown in your entire life. And you fired him for it?" Callahan was speechless, his face ashen. The general wasn't finished. "The contract for all military personnel transport between this city and my base is up for renewal next month. Consider your bid rejected." He then turned and walked out, leaving a completely shattered Callahan in his wake. General Thorne found Frank at his small apartment, quietly polishing his old service medals. He didn't just offer Frank his job back. He created a new one for him, a lucrative, exclusive contract for Frank to start and run his own private shuttle service, becoming the sole transportation consultant for Fort McKinley, tasked with training new drivers on the real meaning of duty. Frank's last stop had become the first stop of a new honored chapter in his life. He had broken the rules, but he had upheld the code. And sometimes that's what makes a true hero. Kindness and merit are recorded, even when they go unnoticed. To continue hearing stories that prove it, don't forget to follow the Merit Ledger and leave a comment about a time when a small act of kindness made a huge difference. Because every life is a record worth reading.